Hey everybody, what's up from Pokemon Classics, reminding you all that the classics never go out of style. In today's video, I wanted to take an in-depth look into the current state of the Pokemon market and whether or not we're in the proverbial calm before the next big storm. Now, for full disclosure, gotta throw out the disclaimer here that these are merely my observations and opinions as I take past data and current market trends and try to project them off into the future. So this really is speculative in nature. However, what I wanted to do specifically with this video is examine three things. First, taking a look at some of the momentum swings between one aspect of the market, one area, to the next, and what that might indicate. But also, I want to take a look at some of the potential headwinds that we'll be facing in the coming months, and how those might affect supply and demand. Finally, I want to present what I think could be the next big catalyst on the horizon for a potential resurgence of Pokemon moving forward. So that's what this video is going to be all about. Hopefully it's informative, but as always, I invite you to leave your thoughts and comments down in the comments below. Anyway, let's roll into it. Anybody who's been immersed in the hobby long enough knows that the Pokemon market tends to be guided by massive shifts in momentum. We've seen this over the last few years as the vintage market exploded during the COVID pandemic. We saw it with Japanese and sealed products, as well as the waifu craze of 2023. And of course, we've seen it with modern as sealed boxes become more scarce, they elevate in prices, but also with the alt art craze and some of the full arts out there that have garnered a lot of attention. Simply put, there's a lot of money in this hobby waiting to speculate on what the next emerging product or area of the market might happen to be. Now, it's this most areas of the market. In fact, if we take it back to 2020 to 2022, during the vintage pandemic boom, there's probably no better ambassador to represent this than the Charizard Unlimited card from base set in PSA 9 condition. This is a very high volume card with massive liquidity, and you can clearly see the overall market for vintage cards represented by this graph. Now, the Charizard exploded in the later shift where everything is FOMO and people are rushing into the market. Prices are going to overextend themselves, and this inevitably leads to saturation as more and more cards are liquidated to capitalize on that rapid increase in value, and as demand falters because there's just too much supply to meet that demand and people start moving on to other things. I think a lot of people that were originally invested into vintage moved into other areas of the market, and that can help explain the Japanese craze of 2023 to 2024. Now, we saw waifu cards absolutely explode in price and come down just as rapidly, once again following that cycle of massive volatility, oversaturation, and then eventually that revaluation finding stability. This was also true recently of Japanese booster boxes, which have seen a massive correction. And even if you look at something that's really popular like Japanese 151, we're starting to get to that phase of stability as the market actually prices in where that box should align with respect to other products. Now, this is merely speculation on my part, but I suspect that modern investing is in the middle phases of this market cycle. We could take some of the very popular alternate art cards that have seen a massive run-up since January of this year. In some cases, many of them doubling in price, now undergoing a significant correction. When I say significant, we're talking maybe 20 to 30% for some of them, which is a lot, but comparatively, it's still signs of a very healthy market and a great overall appreciation of those individual cards. And a second component of this, I think, applies to booster boxes, where I would describe this as a bit of a pause in market momentum, where money doesn't seem to be shifting and sloshing around as rapidly from one area of the market to the next. For example, you'll see from this price chart of Fusion Strike that not much has happened since about April of 2024 in terms of its valuation. Now, it did experience a massive surge in price in March when it sold out from the Pokemon Center website, but since then, it's been relatively stagnant. And the same can be said about many other sets in the Sword and Shield era, with some stabilizing at their existing price highs, and others, like Lost Origin and Battle Styles here, that had experienced a run-up in the first quarter of 2024, pulling back, retracing a bit here in the second quarter. This trend can also be observed in the singles market, with many high-value chase cards also experiencing that pullback here in the second quarter of 2024. Now, whether those cards be from the Sword and Shield era or from the Scarlet and Violet era, whether they're slabbed or raw, pretty much every card that's popular and is high value has experienced at least some level of significant retrace here in the last few months. Now, again, just to be clear, I don't see this as a problem or a reason to panic, but rather as a healthy indicator for the market as these cards that have experienced a lot of price growth are starting to stabilize and find where those authentic prices should actually be. And if the Pokemon market has taught me one thing, it's that money likes to move from one segment of the market over to another, as people are enthusiastic or speculating on what that next big thing might be. And although we do have some very real headwinds that could be approaching this market, causing it to tighten up a little bit, there are also some really big things coming up in our future that are reason for optimism. So as we discussed earlier, the Pokemon market seems to be shedding some of its past volatility without a clear recipient, without another area of the market clearly becoming the overhyped area where all the money is settling in. I would consider this a healthy pause in the market, but I do think there are several explanatory factors at work here, one of which is the overall saturation of cards and products on the market, making it more selective for individuals on what they actually want to buy. Second, I think we saw that the first half of the Scarlet and Violet era have had lackluster sets that have also led to less enthusiasm among collectors and investors. Finally, I think there's a larger economic situation here where people are perhaps a bit more hesitant rushing into the new economy as well as an election cycle. But we'll unpack each one of these issues in further detail. First, let's talk about supply and demand. Now, I previously made a full video on this topic, but essentially the bullwhip effect is the idea in economics that in a time of increased consumer demand, often there'll be an overproduction of supply, leading to eventual devaluation. The way it works is a consumer will want products that can't be fulfilled, so the retailer will order more from the distributor, and the distributor will order even more from that from the manufacturer, and the manufacturer will make even more than that. So you end up with much more product than there is actual authentic demand for. Now, don't get me wrong, the level of demand for Pokemon cards has remained outrageously high over these last few years, and I'm surprised how consistent that demand has remained. But when compared to production levels, these numbers are just otherworldly. And in fact, in the previous fiscal year, from 2023 to 2024, the Pokemon Company announced producing nearly 12 billion Pokemon cards. Billion with a B. That's astronomical. And in fact, that number accounts for 18.36% of all Pokemon cards ever produced. When you combine that with last year's numbers that were also a record high at the time of 10 billion cards, that's a lot of cards. And it does beg the question, is there enough demand to fully assimilate all of this new supply? And it's not just Modern that's a victim to this. We also see this with graded slabs, where there's been an increase in graded card demand, and companies like PSA had shut down. Other new companies like CGC had entered the market. We saw larger and larger submission volumes than ever before. And now grading companies have expanded their infrastructure and services. There are more companies than ever before handling a greater volume of cards than ever before. That's the bullwhip effect. Speaking of grading companies, if we took one grading company, PSA, which happens to represent the largest of all the grading companies, they're currently on pace to set a record for the most cards graded in a single year at 16.3 million cards for 2024. One interesting thing about this graph, however, is if we were to draw a trend line showing the demand for grading over the last few years, it would demonstrate linear growth, a very clear pattern of linear growth. However, if we applied that same line to just the last few months, I think we'd see that that demand is starting to plateau. And what if we were to examine the grading data by category? Well, I took two pie charts, one from July of 2023 and one from July of 2024, and these are all broken down by individual card category. In this case, the teal happens to represent the TCG category. What you'll find is 1 year ago in July of 2023, there were 405,393 TCG-related cards graded by PSA, and that number is almost identical here in July at 404,113. So even though PSA has processed and graded significantly more cards this July than last year's, fewer of those cards, proportionally, happen to be TCG cards. Now, one would expect that the vast majority of these TCG cards submitted to PSA to be Pokemon cards, and more specifically, modern Pokemon cards. It's no secret that the first half of the Scarlet and Violet era has been viewed by many to be a bit lackluster, especially in comparison to the previous block of Sword and Shield cards. Looking at the performance of booster boxes from the Scarlet and Violet era, you'll see that none of the boxes have yet achieved their MSRP price. While you can certainly buy boxes for less than that, sit on them, and wait for them to appreciate, it often takes time, and so far there haven't been any major home runs like there have been in previous eras like Evolving Skies. I've included the worst performing and best performing booster boxes from the Scarlet and Violet era, and what you'll find is in the case of the worst performer, Scarlet and Violet base, there's been little to no movement over the last year, with these boxes still selling for $96 and some change. And even in the best situation, the best case scenario, our best performing box in that same time frame has been Paldea Evolved, which is currently selling for $132.70. Now this box has seen a lot of appreciation in the last few months, and if you bought in at a low price point, you're probably doing pretty well here. But still, these aren't the types of volatility or price gains that we've seen from previous eras of Pokemon, with sets hitting home runs like Evolving Skies. And I think all of this has collectors and investors just a little bit more hesitant to park their money in these sets until at least more time has passed and it gets closer to going out of stock. Of course, the broader market context could also be a contributing factor here as well, and I don't want to speculate on this one in too much detail, but it is an election year here in the United States, and as the election cycle ramps up, often the markets will become more volatile as potential policy decisions and changes to the economic structuring are in play. And that's on top of an already fragile economy. And although we've had some positive inflation reports and jobs reports and GDP reports here in the United States, there is a pullback in jobs in certain industries, as well as stubbornly high inflation prices and other global economic systems that have been deteriorating throughout the world. And all of that has a domino effect on how people approach their finances. So there could be an element of that to the mix as well, further reinforcing a wait-and-see approach, with people holding off to make any big purchasing decisions. Moving forward, there are a few different directions the Pokemon market could conceivably take. The existing supply and demand balance that we're currently seeing could crystallize, creating long-term stability throughout the market. However, I think that's incredibly unlikely. Given my past experience and observations in the Pokemon market these last few years, I think people are too emotional, too addicted to the volatility and to the massive momentum swing trading to allow anything like that to ever happen. And instead, I think there are a few different catalysts, some different ingredients for the next major shift in market cycle that I wanted to share. The first of these is simply seasonal interest. Now, the summer is a difficult time for the Pokemon trading card game. It usually is because there are so many alternatives and distractions away from specifically and exclusively just one trading card game. In the summer, you have the opportunity for sports, activities, family vacations, beautiful outdoor weather, all competing for people's attention. It's not uncommon for demand to taper a bit and prices to drop a little over the summer. That's typical. And usually, by the close of summer, is when things start ramping up again, and often this corresponds with one of the biggest events in Pokemon for the entire year, the World Championship Tournament. Now, this year's World Championships are taking place in Honolulu, Hawaii, from August 16th to August 18th, and there are a number of other seasonal events that are sprinkled around shortly after that. And although none of these are that big in and of themselves, I think each one helps draw attention and pull people back into the hobby when other alternatives are more limited. In fact, this will be the third year that we have the Trick or Trade packs released for Halloween, as well as another holiday calendar coming out in the winter of 2024. Pokemon has also announced their next premium product, a Charizard EX Super Premium Collection Box. And this isn't your UPC Evolved. This has packs in it, some promo cards in it, but also a Charizard figure that doubles as a display stand. Now, none of these products, again, are ones that I think are going to massively shift the market. But where I think that shift will come is with some of the upcoming sets that have been announced. Now, I know a number of YouTubers and commentators have already discussed and speculated about this, but I'm in agreement here. I think the second half of the Scarlet and Violet block is going to be absolute pandemonium for collectors and investors. I think this is going to be the catalyst that a lot of people are waiting for when reallocating their money, that people were willing to save and be patient seeing these sets coming on the horizon. These three sets alone, I think, are reason to be excited within the community. You have a set called The Glory of Team Rocket, which allegedly will bring back Dark Pokemon, Rocket's Pokemon, and infuse some of those elements from the original Team Rocket set, as well as Team Rocket Returns. This is a set I think that's going to appeal to modern collectors as well as vintage collectors like myself, and just be an absolute perfect storm for Pokemon. You also have a set like Battle Partners, which is supposed to be bringing back Owner's Pokemon, as well as infusing a tag team element to it. Those are really popular mechanics that a lot of people are going to love. There's even a set that's dragon-themed, and dragon type is one of the most popular types out there. So Pokemon clearly knows what they're doing, and they're lining up this second half to be very successful. I also think that it's entirely possible that these new sets could be supplemented by a number of other media and infrastructural developments within the broader Pokemon community. For one, we have Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket that's set to release here at some point in the near future, and I do think that could be a very big marketing opportunity for Pokemon, funneling people into the traditional physical trading card game. Similarly, the new video game, Pokemon Legends, could appeal to a new player base and also act as that funnel back to the trading card game. Meanwhile, you have other infrastructural things that are slowly taking form, taking shape within this community, like the PSA Vault working with eBay being established, the Collectors Magazine that's now producing articles and drawing more attention and cross collectors into Pokemon, as well as other buying and selling alternatives like GameStop and Walmart, these big box retailers. There's a lot happening, and I think it could all culminate at roughly the same time. It's possible. So that brings us back to the big question. Is this the calm before the storm? In the past, the Pokemon market has been riddled with volatility as momentum swings have brought money into one area of the market, into another. Recently, though, that's not what we've seen. We've seen a stabilization across the market and less volatility than ever before. Now again, just to be clear, I'm not expecting another pandemic boom or another Pokemon Go craze that takes the world by storm, but I do think there are a number of people that have been embracing this wait-and-see approach, that have been sitting on the sidelines waiting for something to collect, to invest their money in, and I think some of those upcoming sets in the latter half of Scarlet and Violet are going to be the ticket. That's merely my speculation, seeing what I've seen over the last few years, but I welcome all of your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Anyway, guys, I'm Pokemon Classics, reminding you all that the classics never go out of style. Thanks for sticking around for this video, and we'll see you all with the next one. Till then, don't forget to have fun. That's what collecting is all about. Bye, everybody.